Hi, here we go with chapter 3 and maybe 4. The chase. I was so excited that I didn't have time to be afraid. I had to take action, and fast. I was convinced the strange customer would never come back to the store since he had heard me gasp and knew that someone had caught him drinking ink. I had two choices. Either I could tell my dad everything I'd just seen, or I could figure this thing out all on my own, like a real detective might. I knew my father would never believe me anyway. He might even accuse me of erasing the letters one by one. After all, he knows I'm allergic to reading. So I decide to follow the tracks of this odd reader. "Where are you off to?" Dad said as I dashed out the door. "Oh, just out," I yelled back. In the street, the glare and heat of the sun hit me full blast, and I was afraid I'd taken too much time making up my mind. The ink drinker had vanished. I started to run, weaving in and out among the pedestrians, and raced up the block. Nothing. But giving up was out of the question. This was clearly a once-in-a-lifetime adventure. I persisted in my chase and finally caught sight of my customer. Instantly, I recognized his peculiar looks and his unmistakable walk. He was moving quickly, but his legs were motionless. Everyone in the street steered clear of him. I stopped behind a tree to catch my breath and then followed right along in his tracks. And that's how I ended up in front of the cemetery, which takes us to chapter 4, In the Cemetery. I couldn't help shivering. A cemetery isn't exactly my favorite place to visit, and I knew if I kept on following him, I might end up in maybe some terrible danger. I couldn't stop now. I'm a tough kid, not a coward. I tried to keep up with him as he ran down a path that cut across the middle of the cemetery. Then suddenly he veered off onto a little diagonal walkway, and by the time I arrived at the intersection, he'd disappeared. That's when it hit me. A 7-letter word came out of my lips. Vampire. What an idiot I was not to have realized this instantly. Well, not wanting to have gone through all this trouble in vain, I started to search among the tombstones. Dates and names were engraved on them. Although the people buried underground were unknown to me, I felt uneasy and impolite as well to be walking above their resting places. Yet one of the dead had drunk a book. Where was my vampire hiding? Coming face to face with a vampire is pretty unusual. On top of that, I'd been lucky enough to find a rare ink-sucking one. Lucky and actually scared to death. Suddenly, I saw it. A strange vaulted monument stood in the middle of the path. It resembled the shape of an ink bottle. My knees began to tremble. It was still daylight outside, but it might as well have been pitch black. Moving like a robot, I pushed the gate of the bizarre vaulted grave. It gave way, and it seems it wasn't locked. A flight of stairs went down, deep into the ground. Slowly I descended the steps as cobwebs fell from the ceiling and landed in my hair. And downstairs, I saw a little round room whose walls were covered with thousands of books, all tightly packed in, like soldiers at attention. This strange library must be the monster's pantry. A few candles lit a fountain pen-shaped casket that was lying on a platform, and inside, well, my customer was snoring. His body was hidden by a blanket. Only his head, which was resting on a large satin pillow, lay exposed. And I noticed that small, freckle-like letters seemed to be engraved on his papier-mâché skin. I got closer so that I could examine him in better detail. Suddenly he sat up and he fixed his eyes on me. They were dark with ink. Oh, my blood began to churn. I felt as jumbly as a soft-boiled egg, and I wondered if vampires happen to like their legs, their eggs, soft-boiled. Stay tuned for chapters 5 and 6.